I'm really excited to be with Chip Conley today. Chip's a good friend of ours and the author of 3 great books, Rebel Rules, Peak, How Great Companies Get Their Mojo from Maslow, and most recently, Emotional Equations. We're going to talk today about how leaders can develop self-awareness around their emotions and the impact those emotions have on the people around them, and how it can impact not only the performance of the organization, but their ability to lead. Chip, thanks for being with us today.
Yeah, it's great. I love it, Jim. It's nice to talk about these subjects, and especially with the whole Renaissance family.
This is an interesting topic, set of topics for you. What led you to focus on this particular field of study?
Let me say that I didn't get into business thinking I was going to write books. But when I was a kid, I wanted to be a writer, but I never thought I was necessarily going to write. But I found the process of writing as a means of actually understanding the wisdom I was learning along the way. And the last 2 books, Emotional Equations, the most recent one, and then the one before that, Peak, really are at the intersection of psychology and business. And what I've found over all my years, almost 24 years of being a CEO, is that one of the best skills you can have as a leader is just understanding people. And I mean, it's so obvious, but what I've tried to do in both these books, with Peak in an organizational context and with Emotional Equations more on the personal side, is to understand how do you understand psychology and make it practical on a day-to-day basis in your leadership practices.
And the other part about both books, and I think all 3, but particularly this last one, is not only understanding people, but relating to them.
Yeah.
And the formulas seem to really allow for the relating to other people's experiences.
You know, for a lot of people, they say that it's all about how you make a person feel, and that's opening the door to then helping them understand something. But if you don't actually help build that awareness of why they should be listening to you, they may not listen, and you may not listen. I mean, it really is. It goes both ways. So some of emotional intelligence is not about just how are you a better leader because you're more charismatic and more passionate and more the kind of person someone wants to follow, but it's also how do you actually listen well, and how do you get your ego out of the way in a way such that people actually leverage their own leadership skills in ways that are advantageous to the business.
Well, it was a bit of an up and down path that led you to the concepts in this book. Would you like to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, it's interesting. The last 2 books both relate to a downturn. The Peak was the dot-com bust, which here in the San Francisco Bay Area was almost like a depression. And I turned to Abe Maslow's famous, iconic hierarchy of needs. In this downturn, the Great Recession, I turned to Viktor Frankl, a famous psychologist who wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning. And I was basically in a place in my life where I was not finding much meaning being a CEO anymore. I'd been a CEO for, at that point, about 22 years. And I had my whole life, not just my work life, but my whole life was sort of turned upside down. And I was having a hard time understanding what the meaning was of this. And I had one of my closest friends, right as I was going through my little crisis of existential crisis, one of my closest friends, who happened to be our insurance broker, his name's Chip Hankins, committed suicide. And so being, a good friend, having a good friend commit suicide who happens to be a business person, and having him have the same name as me at a time when I was getting depressed myself, it really forced me to really up the ante in terms of understanding and having the self-awareness of saying, what's going on with me right now? And I better figure this out pretty quickly because I'm the emotional thermostat of the organization.